We here have Steve Galvin.
Galvin,
sorry,
yeah.
Apologies.
Right.
5G and the fourth industrial revolution, which will also cover smart cities. And then there'll be some question and answers at the end. So thank you, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming out today. I know we've all got busy lives, and I mean, we don't all want to be going to presentations on things of this nature. I mean, I've got plenty of other things that I probably would prefer to be doing, but this is a very important topic, and I think these sort of forums need to be done. I would really like to thank Kate and Flavia and Matt for setting this up and putting this on and inviting us here. So I'll just give you some background. Oh, by the way, you'll have to bear with me. Naomi speaks from her memory. My memory is not that good because I'm getting older, so I have to have my notes on here. But unfortunately, my eyesight's not good enough to see it, so we had to make this little makeshift podium. So if I stutter, you'll have to give me the benefit of the doubt. So just to give you some background information on myself, obviously my name's Steve Galvin, and for the past probably 6 or 7 years, I've been campaigning to raise awareness of the dangers of 5G and wireless technology. I actually started my very first presentation on 5G, I think would have been probably 7 years ago. And it's actually my very good friend over there, Kathy, had a centre in Minchinbury, and it's probably thanks to her I had the opportunity to start doing these presentations and how this whole thing sort of evolved. Well, my wife and I, Rosie, who's sitting next to Kathy over there, we've got 7 children and 8 grandchildren, so naturally I'm extremely concerned with what this is going to do to our kids, what impact it's going to have on them, and what sort of a future we're creating for them, you know. Several years ago, I created this Facebook group called Stop 5G Australia, and that's now evolved into Australians for Safe Technology. And from that first group, a huge grassroots movement emerged. As Naomi was saying, in 2019, it just exploded. And we counted, I think Arlene here was one of the admins for Central Coast for Safe Technology, plus an admin for Australians for Safe Technology. We had a list that Arlene compiled of the groups, and I think there was something like 150 groups, wasn't there, at one stage? Stop 5G groups all around Australia, and this had all sort of sprung up in the space of about a year. And we had in Stop 5G Australia, we had 50,000 members, and I think all up around Australia we worked at something like under 100,000 members. And that was, I mean, Naomi mentioned before about her Four Corners interview. That was one of the reasons why they wanted to do this Four Corners documentary, was because they were absolutely blown away how this grassroots movement sprung up overnight with all these people with no apparent figurehead or leader and no apparent source of communication between all the groups. And I think that was what it was all about. But yeah, it really did sort of take off overnight. So for the past 5 years, I've also been involved with Children's Health Defence Australia, and we're also, a few of the members are also in the process of creating a new project, which is going to be very exciting, and hopefully we're going to emulate the success of the Stop 5G movement. I'm also an admin for several other Facebook groups, Telegram groups, Instagram groups, and I actually do spend too much time on social media. I've got a bit of an addiction that I'm trying to address, the same as all of us. All those groups really have the same objectives. And from the beginning, every single one of them has had the same fundamental mission, and that's to raise awareness of the dangers of wireless technology, to protect the health, the well-being and safety of all children, and to expose and make accountable those that would seek to do harm. And I mean, after all, our children are the ones that are going to face the consequences of what we are creating now. So what I'm going to talk about today is really a huge topic. I mean, what Naomi was talking about with the health effects and whatever, that is just a small part of it. Really, we haven't got enough time to cover everything, so I just want to talk about a few of the a few of the parts of it that I think are pretty significant and things that are going to affect all of us. And what it is, it's like a perspective on the 5G network that you probably won't see in the mainstream media. And it's how 5G is integral to a lot of these issues that we're facing. And it's probably what people would refer to as the fourth industrial revolution. I mean, we're all familiar with the first industrial revolution, where we had coal and steam power going through to electricity, then to computers, and now we're in an information and data age, which is what they would call the fourth industrial revolution. So as a society, we're facing many issues, and 5G really is at the core of a lot of them. And on the surface, these are probably seen as not as issues, but as gateways to a utopian society. I mean, obviously, we were just talking about this. I was just talking about this with Matt. Where did Matt go? Just a few seconds ago. How the powers that be, who are behind all these issues, they've had the benefit of human psychology and marketing going back hundreds and hundreds of years. They know how to push people's buttons, and they've got a lot of people accepting that this is the way to go, this is the way forward. But rather than being a utopian society, I mean, it's far removed from that. It's more like a dystopian nightmare, if anything. So, as I said, several years ago, I created Stop 5G Australia. And then about 2 years ago, we changed the name to Australians for Safe Technology. And there was a few reasons for that. One being that the government and the telcos at the time had a witch hunt into the Stop 5G groups, and there were a lot of Stop 5G groups that were being shut down. Secondly, we'd been promoting this message of Stop 5G, and it was quite a negative message. We wanted to promote something that was a lot more positive, and that was the use of technology safely. I mean, we're not anti-tech. We all enjoy the benefits of tech, but it's something that we need to learn to do safely. And then the third reason was also we were being portrayed as a bunch of conspiracy theorists, which made it very difficult to be taken seriously, even though there was a mountain of credible evidence that what we were sharing was supported in science. So we took the stance that we would only focus on the health effects or on topics that could be backed up with credible science. But even then, back then, there were still many of us within the movement that could see that there was a much bigger picture and there was a much bigger agenda at stake. But they say that the difference between a conspiracy theory and the truth is about 6 months. So it's no surprise now that topics that were taboo a couple of years ago are now actually being spoken about in the mainstream press. And there's too many to go into today, but there's just a few that I'd like to talk about that I believe that have the potential to have a huge impact on each and every one of us. Now there's a couple of things I'd like to talk about very briefly. Naomi's covered all the biological effects and all of them, part of them. I mean, that's a huge topic in itself, but she's touched on that pretty comprehensively. There's just one point I'd like to make with the biological effects, and then I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the standards and the safety testing, or as we prefer to call it, the non-safety testing. So, as Naomi mentioned before, we've got an association here in Australia called ORSA, the Oceanic Radio Frequency Scientific Advisory Association. And they're a group of highly respected, highly credentialed Australian scientists, and their mission is to collate all the data from studies, reports, papers that have been written, collate them all, sift through them and see which ones prove harm, which ones prove no harm. So basically they've taken about 3,000 or just over 3,000 studies and research papers and whatever, and they've peer reviewed them, and they found that in those 3,000 plus studies, over 70% of them prove biological harm. Or saying prove biological harm is probably pushing it too far, but they indicate that there is biological harm. So 70% of them find biological harm. And as we know, the other 30% that find no harm the majority of them are funded by the telcos, which is, you know, quite just a bit of a coincidence maybe. But the disturbing thing is they've got 70% of them have found biological harm. Those studies, the majority of them are based on 1G, 2G, 3G and 4G. There's very little on 5G. So we really, I mean, we all talk about 5G. We really don't know exactly how bad it's going to be. I mean, we know how bad 4G is, 3G, 2G, but we really don't know how bad 5G is going to be. So to put it into perspective, we know that 1G was the very first system we had when we had the brick phones, and that was an analogue network. Then they went digital, we had 2G, then 3G, 4G. With each incarnation, it was a slight upgrade to the technology, slight upgrade to the benefits of the phone. So it was faster speeds, better calls, better transfer rate, more data, etc. And that was up to 4G, where that operates at about 2.4 gigahertz. Okay, so then we went to 5G, which is a whole new ballgame. It's not an upgrade from 3G to 4G, 4G to 5G, as most people believe. It is a completely new system, and it's capable of so much more than the previous versions. When it first was unveiled a couple of years, about 2 years ago, isn't it? I think it was about 3.5, 3.6 gigahertz. So it was about 50% more than what 4G was putting out. Well, last year, I think it was April last year, there's an association called ACMA, the Australian Communications Media Authority. And they handle all the auctions for the frequency licenses for the, yeah. And so Telstra, Optus and Vodafone, whatever, they'll go into an auction and they'll buy the frequencies. So they approved the introduction of the 26 gigahertz bandwidth range. So we've got currently 3.5 to 3.6. Now that they've authorised the 26 gigahertz range, so that means that pretty soon the telcos are going to start upping the frequencies to 10 times more than what has already proven to cause harm in 70% of the studies. So we've already got 70% of the studies proving harm, and now they're going to turn that up to 10 times more, which is pretty scary stuff. And to be honest, we don't really know exactly how bad it's going to be. We know it's bad, but we just don't know the full effect of it. I mean, it could be in years to come, we could be finding out some disastrous effects. I mean, we know what happened with asbestos, the thalidomide, smoking, whatever. And the really shocking thing is, with the current infrastructure, they can actually turn that up to 95 gigahertz. Yeah, and with some updates, the standards they've got in place at the moment cater for 300 gigahertz. So Christ knows what's going to happen if they ever get to that stage, but we'll probably all be dead by then. So just to mention, I actually had access to Naomi's presentation, and there was one bit I wanted to put in this, and I thought, well, that's good. She hasn't got it in hers, but then it actually cropped up in the question time, but I'll go through it anyway. So as Naomi mentioned, we're all electromagnetic beings. On a purely physical level, we know there's a lot more to us than meets the eye, but on a purely physical level, we're pretty much just chemical reactions and electromagnetic fields. And we've evolved over thousands of years surrounded by other electromagnetic fields. We've got the electromagnetism from the sun, the Schumann resonance of the earth, electromagnetic fields from nature, from each other, from everything around us. And we've developed this symbiotic relationship with ourselves and our environment and others. And that is what has enabled us to thrive here on planet Earth. It's totally natural, and that's the essence of what we are. Well, things started to change a few hundred years ago, obviously, with the introduction of electricity. That was an alien electromagnetic field introduced into what is our natural environment. And over the last few hundred years, that has just compounded and compounded. As they've had each new advance, I mean, they started out with just electric lights and then electric industry, full-on electric houses with power points and whatever, refrigerators going. And then that sort of followed through, right through to radio waves, radars, then the internet, computers, and now we're into the wireless technology. So what we've been subject to has just kept increasing and increasing and increasing. And I was going to say to everyone, would you be shocked if you found out that what we've been exposed to has increased, has doubled, or even tripled? Or would you be shocked if it had gone up by 100 times or 1,000 times or even 1,000,000? But the actual amount that we've been subject to, or how it's increased over the last 250 years, is 1 quintillion times. And just, saying 1 quintillion times probably doesn't give the impact, but that's the number there, 1 with 18 zeros after it. That is how much additional EMR that we've been subject to in the last 250 years. And that is totally artificial. And with the introduction of digital technology, it is now a pulsed signal. And pulse signals are far worse than the old signals because they're like a mishmash of all these other signals chopped up, mashed together. And it's like, you imagine if you're standing in the sea, the sea's calm, yeah? Okay, it's not too much of it's not going to affect you too much. But when waves keep hitting you, one after the other, that's like the pulse of an electromagnetic device. So really, it is just unbelievable how much it's increased. And so what I was going to say was how has this increased exposure managed to go on for so long unchecked? And why isn't anybody doing anything about it? Or why hasn't anybody been doing anything about it? Well, for a long time, most scientists were pretty oblivious to the harmful effects. And more recently, scientists are starting to come on board with the effects, but the trouble is they're being counteracted by other scientists who are captured by the telecommunications industry. And unfortunately, we're fighting against a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Virtually, it's like fighting an army with sticks and stones, and it's quite a battle. But fortunately, we do have some government bodies and regulatory agencies that have our best interests at heart, okay, which is the ACMA, ARPANSA and ICNIRP, just to name three. Okay, so ARPANSA is the, ACMA, ACMA, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, sets the standards for what is safe for RF radiation emissions within Australia. And they base that on ARPANSA's recommendation. And ARPANSA gets its recommendations from ICNIRP, which is the international version of ARPANSA. Interestingly, ARPANSA gets a lot of its funding from the telecommunications industry. ICNIRP, on the other hand, gets most of its funding from the telecommunications industry. And ACMA, I'm not sure if it gets any funding from I think it gets government funding, but mainly it derives its income from selling off auctioning off the spectrum licenses. So without the telecommunications industry, ACMA doesn't get any money. So maybe there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there. There are a few key players as well. There's one very nice gentleman, these ladies here would love him, Rodney Croft. He's a professor at Wollongong University, and he's also the chairman of ICNIRP, and he's also an ex-director of ARPANSA. So there's no conflict of interest there, that's all above the board, except for the fact that Wollongong University is a very highly technological university, and it actually has the Smart Infrastructure Facility, and it is one of the leading smart research facilities on the planet. And they are currently putting together the Internet of Things and researching the Internet of Things, partnering with Telstra and Microsoft. So when you put all these things together, it does sound very sus. And then they throw a few others into the mix. There's Ken Karapidis from ARPANSA, who is just a paid stooge. He's quite famously been caught on radio saying that our Panzer can't guarantee that 5G will cause harm, which was quite a good moment. And then there's Dr. Carl, you're probably familiar with him, he's just off the planet. And then there's another guy, Dr. Brendan Murphy, who was our former Chief Medical Officer. He actually lied blatantly and said that 5G will have no impact at all on anyone. So they get away with doing this because what they do is they take all the terms and they interchange them and they switch them around and they confuse everyone. Like for instance, they will only talk about EMFs or EME, which is electromagnetic frequencies, electromagnetic energy, which sounds quite innocuous. But really what we should be talking about is EMR and RFR, which is electromagnetic radiation and radio frequency radiation. I mean, obviously radiation has a lot of bad implications to it. It doesn't sound very good. So they deliberately omit that from any conversation. They'll also take the measurement standards, which is microwatts or milliwatts, centimetre squared or metre squared. And they interchange them back and forth just to confuse everyone. For instance, I think that's on the next slide actually. Yeah, so for instance, to convert from microwatts, to convert from centimetre squared to metre squared, you have to times by 10,000. Yep. To convert from microwatts to milliwatts, you have to times by 1,000. So when you look at the outcomes of those figures, it's quite bizarre how much the amounts actually increase. But by interchanging all the measurements, it just confuses everyone. So nobody can really keep on top of it. You've got to really study it to get your head around. Now this is the safety limit that has been recommended or has been imposed by ACMA here in Australia, and it's also in the USA and Canada, and I believe the UK is the same, isn't it? I think the UK is the same. And they set that at 1,000 microwatts per centimetre squared. Yep. And same again, when you get to our Panzer reports, there's a website that I'll talk to you about shortly called RFNSA. And what they do is they list all the phone towers in an area, and you can go on a map, you can see where they are, you can click on the phone tower and it will go into the details about it, and it gives you a safety report. The safety report is from our Panzer. Now the our Panzer safety reports always operate in milliwatts per metre squared. So they've given you a standard and then they give you a safety report in a totally different context, just to make it so confusing for everyone. But what is interesting is, actually I'll get to the after. So anyway, we have building biologists. We've got Jodie Donovan right here, who's a building biologist in the area. They will conduct environmental reports into homes to establish elements that may be harmful to health, allergens, toxins, heavy metals, mould, etc. Some of the elements that they consider are the levels of RF and EMF radiation from nearby mobile phone towers, Wi-Fi, power lines and electric meters, etc. Now what is an acceptable limit is less than 10 microwatts per metre squared in a sleeping area, yeah, or less than 100 microwatts per metre squared in just a residential area, yeah, in just a living area. And the optimum really is to keep that as close as possible to zero. So if you take a microwatt per metre squared, milliwatt per metre squared, you times it by 1,000, you have to times it by 1,000 to convert that into microwatts. This is probably going to get a bit heavy. So moving on to the next slide.
But I'll point out, if you've got a modem in your house, you can just say goodbye to me.
Well, that's right, yeah. The environmental report. This is from the RFNSA website. At the end, I'll show you, I'll actually get the RFNSA website up and show you how you can navigate it. So this is a tower I found in Holland Park in Queensland. Okay, and this isn't the highest levels. I have seen higher, but this was the highest one I could find. If you go into the safety report, that is the proposed configuration of the upgrades, which I believe have actually been done now. So we've got, if you're 50 metres to 100 metres away from the tower, 1,586 milliwatts per metre squared. Okay? Now, if you convert that into microwatts, which is the measurement that building biologists use, you have to times it by 1,000. So that now becomes, I think it's 1,586,410 microwatts. So 1.5 million microwatts. Just go back to the last slide. No, the one before that. So what was the maximum safe level in a sleeping area? Less than 10 microwatts. But what they're saying in their report is that 50 to 100 metres from the tower, it is 1.5 million microwatts. It's just absolutely crazy. And they're saying that this is safe. But the bizarre thing is, they give you a percentage of the safety standard on all these towers. Forget the old safety percentage, because that's actually going down with the upgrade. 22% of the safety standard. So that is 22% of the 1,000, yeah? So 22% of 1,000 is around about here, yeah? So that tower would be illegal in all these countries. So how our government can allow these regulatory agencies to get away with this is absolutely beyond me. But that just gives you a little bit of an idea of what the standards are and just how corrupt they are.
Steve,
One more.
I think it's important to note too, those numbers on the RFNSA website are just computerised. They're just computerised.
Yes,
They're
yeah.
estimates.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Measured.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, there is, as Arlene was saying, that's computer modelled. That isn't someone going around with a meter actually measuring
They
them.
don't actually go to the sites and actually
No.
test.
I think they did, but I think they found they were too high, weren't they? Yeah.
They told me that. Yeah.
But just lastly, on the safety standards and the safety testing, this is Sam. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him. His name comes from specific anthropomorphic manicured. And what it is, we've all got the mobile phones here. You probably know heaps of people with mobile phones. Every single mobile phone that is on the market is tested using this method. They don't test every mobile phone, obviously. Samsung will create a batch of 1,000, 10,000, whatever. They'll take one phone out of that batch and they test it. If it proves that it's safe, then the rest of the other 1,000 or 10,000 are safe. Basically what they do is they take this plastic dummy head, which is representative of an army personnel guy, 6'4", weighing 100 kilos. Now I don't know about you, but I don't know many guys 6'4", weighing 100 kilos. I mean, I think it covers something like 3% of the population of the planet, which I think even that might be pushing it a little bit. But anyway, that's what they decided was the perfect size being for a test. So they get this head, they fill it with this liquid, which I believe is like a saline solution, isn't it? And they put a thermometer into the top of the head. They strap a telephone to the side of his head. This one actually shows the phone right up against the head. But the actual test they do, they leave I think this is just a CGI image. The actual test they do, they leave a gap of 1.5 centimetres. Because I don't know if you all know, but if you look through your literature from the manufacturer of your phone, it states in there quite clearly that you should never hold your phone next to your skin. Always maintain a gap of 1.5 centimetres. Always use it on hands-free or plug in earplugs or whatever, but never hold it to your skin. So they hold it 1.5 centimetres away from his head. They have a 6-minute telephone call, and then if that temperature gauge registers less than 1 degree rise in temperature, that's safe. Now, that doesn't account for any biological effects at all. All they're doing is measuring the temperature, which we know if you hold your phone to your ear, it gets hot after a while. But is that going to be hot enough to create a 1 degree rise in temperature in the centre of your brain? Probably not, I don't think so. And I don't know of any phones that have actually been knocked back using this testing method. But in any case, that is the method they use to test every single phone. Now, if they use something along these lines to test cars for safety, or even a kettle or a toaster, there would be public outrage. But in any case, that is the test. So what is 5G technology? Well, we know that it's not just an upgrade, it's actually a whole new technology. But 5G just refers to the 5th generation of mobile telecommunications. Now, according to the telcos and the government, it's all about the future. It's about faster internet, clearer communications, interconnectivity. It's about bringing people together, which is really good, in creating a global community, which sounds absolutely amazing. But saying that, we've all seen that these towers going up, and so the lovely people at Telstra, Optus and Vodafone have obviously invested billions and billions of dollars, and they've worked around the clock, and may I add, without being affected by any lockdowns like the rest of us, and they've created one of the largest infrastructures that any industry has ever seen in the space of a few years. And that is all so that we can download a movie in 4 seconds and talk to relatives crystal clear on the other side of the planet. Does anybody really believe that?
No.
So
I think it's all about the global currency.
So everywhere you look, there's mobile phone towers going up at an alarming rate. Every street corner, 5G, small 5G cells are starting to pop up. Every street corner, every lamppost, every building, every public building. And they come in all shapes and sizes. So we often get people posting photographs in the Australians for Safe Tech group, and they'll say, "What's this?" And 9 times out of 10 they are 5G cells, because they're so varied and they're so different. People don't know what they're looking at. Sometimes they'll post a photograph of a capacitor or something on a telegraph pole, which is compared to this, it's fairly innocuous. But there's so many different types, and they're popping up everywhere. So eventually, the plan is to have one of these every 50 to 100 metres. We know we've got the big towers all over the place, but obviously 5G, with the frequencies, they can't go long distances, or this is what we've been told. So the reason why we have to have all these little small cells is because of the frequencies, they have to keep the power down, and they can actually interact with each other a lot better if they're in closer proximity. So probably the best solution would be to move out into the bush and get right away from it, yeah? Well, that would have been until the world's coolest billionaire entered the scene. Enter Elon Musk. Okay, now this guy is so cool, he smoked a joint with Joe Rogan on the Joe Rogan show. He wanted to buy Twitter because he's obviously a real advocate of free speech, which actually fell through. He wears cool t-shirts, so that's got to be good. And he launched a car into space. So this guy's got to be pretty amazing, hasn't he? Well, as of January 22 this year, there was nearly 5,000 satellites in space in low Earth orbit. Elon Musk has had approval for launching another 12,000, which he's in the process of doing, and he's also seeking approval to launch another 30,000. So eventually we're going to have all these women's satellites up there, along with the other internet companies that are following suit. Potentially, in a few years' time, we could have 100,000 satellites orbiting low Earth orbit, and these are to provide internet coverage and infrastructure for the Internet of Things and smart cities for the areas that are outside the urban areas. So pretty much every rural area is going to be covered. So what is all this infrastructure for? I mean, we know they're promoting it as downloading movies in 4 seconds, but really, it's got to be for something, hasn't it? So the plan is the Internet of Things. We'll say the plan, they are actually starting to implement it as we speak. And I believe that it is multi-layered, what they're doing, but one of the objectives really is the Internet of Things. So we've had smart technology for quite some time now. I mean, it's going back 10, 15 years, getting on for 20 years now, isn't it? So we've got smartphones, we've got laptops that are smart, and iPads, etc. And we have all reaped the benefits of this. I mean, in some degree, it has actually made our lives easier, and it's made life a little bit more simple. How far you take that is really up to the individual. I mean, these devices are engineered for addiction. And as the Internet of Things rolls out and the smart grid gets bigger and bigger, we're seeing a lot more people becoming so dependent on these devices that they've forgotten what it was like to live in a world pre-smart tech. I mean, I know, I've said this to a few people. When I was a kid, I could remember 100 telephone numbers in my head. Now I'm lucky if I can remember 2 or 3. I used to be able to drive anywhere with a street directory in the car and just look briefly, see it was next to a street where I already knew, and I'd just drive there. Now we're using satellite navigation for everything, so nobody knows where they're going anymore. They're just listening to a voice on their phone. And there's also one area that I'm not going to cover today because it's quite a big topic, and it is really concerning, and that is the world of virtual reality, and that is tied in quite heavily with the Internet of Things. And really, if anyone's got young children and they're getting into VR, then you really need to research what it is, what's going on, and try and keep them in check, because it's pretty scary. So I guess most people here have got a smartphone, a tablet or a laptop. In fact, 83% of the people on the planet own a smartphone, and that equates to about 6.6 billion people. But now, to add to the phones, tablets and laptops, we also have smart televisions. Yep. We have smart appliances. In fact, every appliance that you have in your house can be purchased with smart capabilities. Your cooker, your fridge, your dishwasher, your washing machine, kettle, you name it, they can make them smart. We also have smart meters, which were spoken about earlier. They're advertising them or promoting them as streamlining our delivery services for our utilities. I mean, we pick on smart electric meters, but you can actually get smart water meters, smart gas meters, and that is something that they will want to introduce down the track. For streamlining delivery and for billing services, they don't have to keep sending someone out to read your meter. They can do it all via the internet. And these things hook up to your Wi-Fi, and they also give the utility companies centralised control of your utilities. Now, I know we saw, I think it was last week in the States, all these people they had a bit of a heat wave and they turned off all their air conditioners. I mean, I work personally in the mechanical services industry, which is like commercial air conditioning, ventilation, etc. And we install split systems. All split systems come with the capability of installing a card which actually interfaces with your Wi-Fi and gives the utility company the opportunity to turn off your air conditioner if they see fit. Now, in New South Wales, we don't install the cards, but in Victoria, it's actually compulsory to install these cards in air conditioners. And obviously, a lot of people in Victoria may not have Wi-Fi, so they're not able to access them. But once they do have Wi-Fi, if there's a hot day, the grid's suffering, they can just go bang, turn everyone's aircon off. Or if you've eaten too many steaks one week and your carbon footprint's getting up there, they can say, right, you've created all those carbon emissions through the cows farting or whatever. Bang, we'll turn off your air conditioner to make up for it. So who knows what they can do with it. And there's pretty much everything in your home can be controlled via the internet from remote. I mean, you could be sitting on a beach somewhere halfway around the world, and through your smartphone, you can control your air conditioner, your smart media, your curtains, your lights, everything. Because once it's all part of this Internet of Things and the smart grid, and it's hooked up to your smart home network. I mean, we've seen the Google Alexa, is it? And then there's the what's the other one? It's not Apple? Yeah. So we've got all these smart home networks, and they are like the centralised control hub for all the smart devices, and everything will connect to them. And then obviously via them will connect to the the internet and the smart matrix. But as they say in the adverts, but wait, there's more. Smart plates, yeah? So if you're conscious about your health and your diet and losing weight, you can get a smart plate which has sensors in it, which connects to an app, which connects to your smart home network. You can apportion all your meals on there. It'll tell you what calories you're consuming. Christ knows what. I mean, why anyone wants to know through their plate what they're eating, I mean, I don't know. But what they plan to do eventually is anything that is produced or manufactured will have smart capabilities. And it's all enabled by these tiny little RFID chips. And they are actually in the process of manufacturing billions and billions of these chips. And the intent is to put one in everything that is manufactured or processed. I mean, at this stage, I don't think they've got plans to put them into fruit and vegetables, but I'm sure someone will come up with an idea to make that happen. I don't know. But basically what they can do is they can put these into hairbrushes, your toothbrush, kids' toys, babies' nappies to tell you when they need changing. Your milk carton could have one in, and your milk carton can then talk to your fridge and tell it when it's running out of milk or if the milk's out of date, and then your smart home network can order more milk from the supermarket. It's just crazy how much of an interaction these things will actually have with each other. And it's not just restricted to our homes. Smart cars. There's a big push at the moment. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but they seem to be pushing electric vehicles for some reason. And basically, petrol vehicles are very hard to control remotely. So electric vehicles are ideal. If they can push everyone to get electric vehicles, they can make them all smart, autonomous driverless vehicles, and they'll all be controlled by AI, which is a bit worrying, because you'll have all these cars zipping about all over the place, controlled by AI, nobody at the wheel, and then there's the other aspect of it. Like I said before, if you eat too many steaks one week and your carbon footprint's too high, they can say, right, well, you can't drive your car this week, and bang, they can turn it off, you can't go to work. Which is, I mean, it all sounds a little bit ominous, but there are people out there that are trying to make this happen. So we've got all these cars zipping around that can be shut down whenever they want. But the thing to remember, okay, the Internet of Things relies 100% on smart technology. Yeah, it only operates if we buy the smart devices. So we have to keep that in the backs of our mind. And then obviously the next step to this is the smart cities. I don't know if you're all familiar with Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. Agenda 21's already passed now, but it's the United Nations plan for future sustainability. And basically their goal is to get everyone out of the rural areas and into the smart cities so they can be monitored and controlled. I mean, that's what it comes down to. If you read their promotion of it, it sounds much better than that. It's about regreening the environment, about sustainable agriculture, feeding the starving, creating no homeless and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, they want everyone in smart cities off the land. They want the land owned by big corporations, agricultural corporations. I know that I've seen that Bill Gates is now the largest agricultural landowner in the United States, which is pretty scary. Yeah. Well, basically, how I look at it is, I mean, on a spiritual level, we talk about the microcosm of the macrocosm and how we live in a fractal universe and everything is just the extension of something else. Basically, what they are trying to create with the smart cities, they create the smart home, and the smart home is just like a cell in the smart city network. And the smart city network is just another cell in the smart country and the smart planet and the smart grid. And it's just pretty much, as they say, as above, so below. And it's just a natural progression. And it's on an artificial level. And I mean, really, we're organic beings. And I think we need to pull it back in. So the Smart City Initiative also offers incentives for for councils who adopt smart technology and come on board with the Smart City initiative. And from my research, I found that there's about 100 cities around the planet that are actually classified already as smart cities. I know Newcastle is touted, that Kate was sending me information on the other day, to be one of the next smart cities. And there's also a little town in northern New South Wales called Lismore. I don't know if you're familiar with it. All the residents have actually been offered by the benevolent government funds to relocate, because they wanted to flatten the city, and it's already been touted as being a smart city. So, which is, I mean, I know there's a lot of people talking about the floods being geoengineering, is it or isn't it? We can't really get into that now, but I'll just say it's a big coincidence. And then there's also the high-speed rail link, which is going to link Brisbane to Melbourne, which luckily is going ahead now because the bushfires destroyed all the land in between. But that's another story. So, one thing to remember, that with the smart grid, the thing that is essential to the smart grid is the smartphone and smart tech. That's how we all get connected. Without it, the whole thing becomes obsolete, falls on its face. Moving a step further, industry. There is actually a lot of industry now that is pretty much smart tech controlled by AI. Whereas you had a factory years ago with 100 people, now they only need one person sitting there at the helm, and they can control everything. Smart farming, which is actually, there are a few groups in Australia that are actually pushing ahead with this, and it's a bit concerning because one of those groups is supposedly a freedom truth-seeking movement, but anyway, that's another story. But basically the farmer will be able to sit in his office. He won't have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go out in all weathers. He can monitor everything from his office. Drones flying over the property with cameras so he can see what's going on. Cows that have Wi-Fi capabilities. They are actually working. I mean, they can actually sense when they need milking, if they're sick, if you know what their status is. But they are actually working on a way to guide the cows so they actually walk themselves into the milking sheds. Whether or not they'll come up with one that actually guides the cows into the abattoirs, I don't know. I mean, that might be pushing it a bit too far. But tractors that are GPS controlled. I mean, pretty much what would have taken a workforce of, I don't know, 10, 15 people now can be just be done with one person sitting at a computer. And same again, it all relies on smart technology. But wait, there's still more. Really? The Internet of Bodies. Okay, that's where they want to go with the next step, the Internet of Bodies. They want to get everyone into the smart grid. And they've already actually produced these RFID chips. I'll go into it a bit later, but there's a few countries that actually use them for their public rail system. I know there's a lot of people in Europe that like the club scene in Europe's quite big, and they like to go from club to club. They don't want to carry a wallet and cash or card or whatever, so they have an implant in their hand. They scan into the clubs, they pay for all their drinks with their hand and whatever. And so this is something that is happening. I mean, we've been doing it to our pets for years, so really the natural progression is for human beings. And one way that they're promoting it is that it's for your health. I mean, obviously, if you've got health issues, having a biometric RFID chip installed in your hand is going to relay information on whether you're sick, what your temperature is. If you've got heart problems, it'll record your heartbeat, and it'll alert the authorities before it ever gets to that stage. So it's obvious that a lot of people would really enjoy it and come on board. Also, another one that they've been talking about is implanting kids. I mean, who wouldn't want the prospect of your kid never ever being abducted? And if they are abducted, you can find them straight away. Which I can understand how that easy that is to promote, but really it's a huge invasion of privacy. And I mean, what they want to store on these chips is pretty much everything, your medical data, your education history, your employment history, your bank account details, your social security number, you name it, it'll all be on there. And that brings us back to our mate Elon Musk with his fascination of implanting microchips in everyone's brains. At what point does transhumanism begin? At what point are we no longer human, but we're machines, you know? And the same again, the Internet of Bodies depends 100% on smart technology. Without it, it's obsolete. Now there's the surveillance aspect of 5G, which is one thing that I find very concerning. And we know that CCTV is really prolific. I mean, there's pretty much no major city on the planet that you can go to without being on camera constantly. China has facial recognition technology that they've implemented, and it's all tied into their social credit system. And they use that as a system of punishment and reward. Obviously, it's used for marketing purposes, which is probably the least pervasive of the reasons for it. But the fact that if you're in a public place and you're outspoken against the government, you could find that the next week you want to go out into the country, you go to get on a train, they won't sell you a train ticket because you've already been recorded saying something that's taboo. And they want to implement this everywhere. They have actually started in Australia, I don't know if you remember a couple of months ago now, Bunnings, Kmart and the Good Guys actually implemented facial recognition technology. And the Good Guys they rescinded it. Was it the Good Guys? I think it was the Good Guys, yeah. They rescinded it because they got so many complaints. But as far as I know, Bunnings and Kmart still have it in place. I don't think they've actually pulled it back. The Australian police force want to implement it for fighting crime, which I can understand. That sounds like a good idea. But at the end of the day, it's an invasion of privacy. There's 5 primary schools in Australia that have introduced it, and they want it's for roll call for the kids to prove that they're there. Okay, the parents will say, yeah, that's a good thing, I know I don't want my kid playing truant, but is it really wise to start handing over that information about our kids to the authorities? And there's also, just recently, Moorebank High School in Sydney, they've started using biometric information for the kids to access the toilets. They've got to use their fingerprint. Fingerprint, okay, maybe that's not the end of the world, but is that the end of it? I mean, it's going to go further. So, how secure is all this technology, the facial recognition technology? Okay, there was a guy in Russia in 2016 called Yegor Svetkov. Okay, and he created this project called Your Face is Big Data, and he went on the St. Petersburg Underground with a camera, and he took photographs of people, and then he tried, I can't remember how many it was, but I think from memory it was something like 100. I can't remember the exact figure. But anyway, he traced them using social media and facial recognition software, and he found every single one of them. And he found out personal details about them, where they worked, where they lived, what their colour eyes were. You name it, he found out everything about them. And he only did it to demonstrate how easy it is and how corruptible it is. So basically, anyone with a computer, some knowledge of IT, and the correct software can actually find out anything about you, which is very disturbing. So how far-reaching is it? Okay. Well, there was a show on, it was a couple of years ago now. I think it was one of the 60 Minutes or Four Corners. I can't remember which one it was now. One of the current affair shows, and they actually looked at these smart TVs, and with the smart televisions turned off, they could still hack into them and use the camera in the smart TV to see everything that was going on inside the room, which is pretty scary. They can record every conversation that you're having, see who's there, they know what you're talking about, and all this information is going back to the likes of Facebook, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, etc. And why they want the information, who knows? There's an interesting point. This is just an add-on. Silicon Valley in the United States, in California, is the home to all the big tech corporations: Microsoft, Google, Amazon, you name it, they're all there. Facebook, and the CEOs and the people high up in these corporations employ nannies, and they sign agreements with their nannies, and their nannies are not allowed to let their children have FaceTime exposure to devices. They're not allowed to come anywhere near a phone, an iPad, a laptop. Yeah. The schools that these people send their kids to don't have any wireless technology. Now, if the people that are creating and selling this technology know something about it that's preventing their children from using it, then why the hell are we using it? I mean, there are obviously a few reasons for it. One is the blue light from the devices. It obviously isn't good for you. The radiation that's generated by the devices isn't good for you. But also there's the spying or surveillance aspect of it. And they know how bad it is. So where does all this data go? So in the 21st century, right, as we're moving into the fourth industrial revolution, data is the new gold. Okay, it's the new currency. Data centres are huge business. In the construction industry, it's the fastest growing type of construction. I mean, I work in mechanical services in the construction industry, and I haven't personally worked on a data centre, just a few small ones in small companies, small buildings. But the company that I work for and lots of other companies that I interact with, they're doing data centres everywhere, huge data centres. So it really is a growing industry. In 2019, it was estimated that there was 8 million data centres worldwide, and that doesn't even account for all the companies that have a high secrecy agreement and keep them quiet. That's just the ones we know about. So interestingly, the 5G network and the Internet of Things and the smart cities and whatever are all being promoted through Agenda 21-2030 as sustainable, green, ecologically friendly. Yeah, there's all these buzzwords they use. Tools that will tackle climate change. Yeah. But bizarrely, by 2025, it's estimated that data centres alone will account for 20% of the global energy consumption. And that is just data centres. If you add into the mix the Internet of Things, the smart grid and whatever, that figure could be as high as 50% of the global energy consumption. And at a time when the same people that are building these things are promoting energy conservation, it just doesn't add up. Then there's also the ecological and humanitarian disasters in the Congo. I don't know if you're all familiar, but the mines in the Congo for these metals that they use for smart technology, for the batteries for electric cars, they employ a lot of child slave labour. It's an absolute disaster, and unfortunately, there's no celebrities jumping on board, calling an end to it, because obviously there's a lot of money invested in it. So, my favourite data centre is the NSA supercomputer in Utah, which they call the Black Widow. Now, there are others like this around the world, but this is the mother of all data centres. And a few years ago, there was a lot of conspiracy theorists saying, they're getting all our data, they're storing it, blah, blah, blah. And everyone was saying, just a bunch of bloody tinfoil hatters. And then Edward Snowden, in 2013, walked out of the NSA headquarters and just spilled the beans on everything. And it's pretty much been confirmed that they keep a file. I mean, remember, a file on one person takes up a little tiny blip in this millions of gigabytes, trillions of gigabytes of the supercomputer. And they keep a file on every person in the Western world who is connected, or even the Eastern world, that is connected electronically to the matrix. Yeah. And by saying that, I mean if you've got a phone, if you've got a computer, an email address, if you've got a Google account, if you've got a Facebook account, if you use a card for paying for your groceries, anything that you do electronically is kept on your personal file in this computer, and there are others. but this is the main one. And when I say they keep all your information, it goes to the degree that if you receive a text message and you think, right, I'm going to tell them exactly what I think, and you start typing back and you get halfway through it and you think, oh shit, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? So you backspace, 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 and then you rewrite it. This computer records all your keystrokes, the backspaces, everything. And what it's doing is it's creating a profile of your personality, your soul. It's got a digital copy of your soul, and it knows how empathetic you are, how compassionate you are. If you're an arsehole, it knows everything about you. Yeah? And so everything you do is stored in there. So at the very best, it is a marketing tool or a political tool. I mean, you imagine if you were in a political race and you wanted to know how the demographic of a certain area would react to certain policies that you were going to introduce, yeah, or not react to certain policies, it would be handy to know what their mindset was like. Yeah, I can understand them using it for that, and that is probably the best scenario. The worst scenario is it's creating a digital copy of your soul in order to manipulate and control you and predict how you will react in every situation, which is pretty scary stuff. And then there's the next step as well with the surveillance is the why. Okay, if you have a Google Home network and you've got a few computers, or a few laptops, a few smartphones, a smart fridge, smart TV, and you've got all these devices around your house, every single one of those is technically a small cell 5G antenna. Okay, you've got a small cell 5G antenna outside your house, but every single one that's in your home will interact with that, and they're all bouncing off each other. And so they can actually create a digital 3D map of the inside of your home, yeah. And once you've got your eye, well, they can see who's there, and they know who they are pretty much, because if you're sitting there on the lounge with your phone in your hand, they know that's you. They know what you're doing. They can hear every conversation, and they can use that to, well, I mean, they can use it as crime-fighting abilities or whatever, but also it's just not very nice to know that there's an AI computer somewhere that is watching you and knows everything that you're doing. And then to take that to the next level, obviously, as we said before, the microcosm of the macrocosm, the smart city, once we've got the smart cities in place, if everyone has their little smart home network, they can virtually create a 3D map of the city, creating a totally artificial matrix, and it links all the smart technology. I mean, obviously there are some benefits, but I don't really want the